I noticed in the United States, there was a rising level of evil on display. You could see it in some of the major cities. Violent criminals weren't being punished, open drug dealing in public schools, civics not being taught, no personal responsibility, that kind of thing. And so I said, I got to reignite this debate about good versus evil.
Former Fulton County District Attorney and Sheriff.
Formerly a judge, and he knows a little bit about how these things go.
From Mohawk Valley, legal eagle, lawman.
He is the Sheriff of Fulton County, New York. Just such an amazing guy.
This is the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.
Yeah, welcome to the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. Today's our second edition in a series of interviews with authors. Again, we have Mr. Bill O'Reilly with us today in his 20th number one best-selling book, which is Confronting Evil. It talks about Hitler, Putin, evils we face along the way. It will be a very interesting show. Bill was with us last year when he talked about confronting the presidents, which again skyrocketed to number one. I ask you to please like, share, and subscribe. And share this with as many of your friends. We're on all platforms: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, and many others. Well, at this point, I want to welcome Bill O'Reilly to the program today. I am honored and privileged to have Mr. Bill O'Reilly on from No Spin News. Bill has a following and subscribers that include millions of individuals each night. At the end of our program today, we'll list how you can subscribe and follow Bill O'Reilly on any of his platforms. Bill's out with another excellent book, Confronting Evil. Bill, this would be your 20th number one bestseller in your series, correct?
That's correct, Sheriff, and thanks for having me in. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I loved reading it because it's so interesting in its historical perspective. You have so many evil doers, as George Bush would say. What would you say the take you want my listeners and the readers of the book to take away from reading Confronting Evil?
Well, it's an story. I mean, I started to write this book, Confronting Evil, a year ago. It takes us a year, Sheriff, to research and write the books. And I did that because I noticed in the United States, there was a rising level of evil on display. You could see it in some of the major cities. Violent criminals weren't being punished, open drug dealing in public schools, civics not being taught, no personal responsibility, that kind of thing. And not only in the USA, but around the world. And so I said, I got to reignite this debate about good versus evil and what people should do if they reject evil. And so I'm going to profile 15 of the worst human beings ever to walk the planet. And the collective thing they all have in common is, number one, the people gave them power. Persians, Germans, Russians, Chinese, they handed it to them. And number two, that in the early days, they looked away from the evil. So Putin is the best example. He's on the book cover, along with Mao Zedong, the Ayatollah Khomeini, and Hitler. And Putin is about as evil as they come. He's a psychopath. He enjoys hurting people. And he's a huge danger to the world. So I want people to know exactly what's happening, because a lot of people, they look away from evil. They don't want to get involved with it, and we're going to have to.
Well, same thing. People don't realize he was literally a cold-blooded KGB killer. And when he was a youngster, the people in the neighborhood referred to him as the rat hunter, because he would hunt down vermin for people and kill them, and he enjoyed it.
On 9/11, I was at Yankee Stadium with President Trump. And obviously that was an unbelievable evil act that took place. And the ball game honored the victims and their families. And I was sitting next to President Trump. And I gave him my book, Sheriff. And I said, listen, Mr. President, I know you're busy, but you got to read this chapter on Putin, because he's not the same guy you dealt with in the first time around. He has gotten a lot worse, and that always happens. And you've seen it yourself, Sheriff. Once you embrace evil, you don't get better. You get worse. And that's what's happened to Putin. And it took President Trump by surprise. He thought he was going to come back, be able to negotiate with Putin in a rational way, and he's not been successful. So now they're going to have to go to plan B. But about 24 hours after I gave him Confronting Evil, I got a text from him saying, wow. And, it's my job as a journalist historian, is to basically tell the truth about the world. And the truth is that we have to confront the growing evil on our planet.
What's sad from my point of view, in 1994, I was the district attorney up here, and we had this whole victimization thing, and we put the focus on the victims. And a lot of that was actually O.J. Simpson. And O.J. Simpson created this, we've got to get the victims' input, we've got to take care of the victims. And now it's flipped around since 2020, and now it's back to protecting the accused, which we already have a constitution and laws to do that. And that scares me to see how the police are the bad guys, how they get indicted. Also to see how you have this girl stabbed to death on the train, and there's a half a dozen people not even looking. They got their AirPods in, they're looking the other way. Are people afraid to get involved because of legal consequences, or do they just think that it's par for the course and not their problem?
I think there's two reasons why people look away from evil. Number one is apathy. They don't care. So you can build your own bubble world on social media now. You don't have to deal with the real world, and a lot of people do that. And so they see something, and they go, I'm not going to get involved with this. Why do I want the hassle? Not that. Even something like violent, And then the second thing is they're physically afraid. And I understand that. I mean, Mexico has been taken over by drug cartels, because if you go up against those people, they'll not only kill you, they kill your entire family. So people are afraid, and the authorities in Mexico cannot or will not protect the population against these drug cartels. So they enable evil. It's the legislature in Albany's fault that we in New York State have this insane view of crime and punishment, but it's also the voters who put them into office. And if you're going to vote for somebody, and New York City is right in the middle of a mayoral campaign now, and their front runner, Mandani, he actually says, I'm going to let out as many criminals onto the street as I can. Well, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to have a rising body count. It's bad now. And yet people will still vote for that. And to me, is a lot of intellectual laziness, a lot of, I'd rather have mine and I don't care about what happens to you, but it always comes back. And that's the message of Confronting Evil. If you allow it in your town, even in your own family, this alleged assassin of Charlie Kirk, his family knew he was becoming radicalized. They knew he was in the dark recesses of social media. Yet, there was no intervention. There's got to be an intervention.
Tell me, I'm glad you mentioned Charlie Kirk. That public view of violence and the assassinations, the attempts on the president, Charlie Kirk, all that's going around, it's so many of these individuals who are doing this, like you say, they've been radicalized. You can follow what's going on with them when you look back, but nothing's done either on the internet. Nothing's done ahead by family or friends, because I think, like you said, there's a culture of, well, it's not my problem, or a culture of, well, I don't want to, what if I'm wrong and I say something bad about this guy? That's what I see. And I think that it's a terrible thing. Tell me about Hitler, because when I read about Hitler, Hitler is your classic kid who was bullied, who was a wimp, let's say, and who all of a sudden just assumed power and had people blindly following him. How do you avoid, there was a great question, and we had it in college and law school. If you knew that the baby was going to grow up to be Adolf Hitler, would you kill the baby? I mean, it's a philosophical question, but how do you evaluate something like that? We don't want to kill babies, but when you go back in time and say, geez, if we knew this guy was going to be so bad, we all should have done something. How do you square those?
Well, number one, in a free society, evil is a huge advantage. So you can't be killing babies because they may do something bad someday. But Hitler, what I tried to do in that chapter was, everybody says, "Oh, well, I know Hitler, I know about him." Yeah, you really don't know about him. So the largest ethnic group in America, German Americans. Okay, and there, if you go to Germany, people there, they speak a different language, a little bit of a cultural difference, but it's essentially the same of what we have in the United States. The same people, look the same, Judeo-Christian background, all that. Hitler got 90% of the vote in 1934 to give him dictatorial powers, even though he wrote a book that said, if I'm in charge, I'm going to start wiping out people at a mass level, Jews, gypsies, communists. He wrote a book and said it, and they still voted for him. So a lot of people say, well, you got what you deserve. Well, did the world get what we deserved? 100 million dead in World War II? And Putin, by the way, is capable of what Hitler did, because Putin's idol is Stalin, who was just as bad as Hitler. And the only reason Hitler has been demonized because of those concentration camps and things like that. They're so vivid. And Stalin had his camps way in Siberia that nobody could see him. But Hitler was an interesting study because the way he got power was so ruthless. It like makes a mafia chieftain look like a nun. That's how bad this guy was. And the German people just looked away. Just looked away from it. They had to know. And that's what I'm trying to fight in America. We have so many millions of Americans look away. The progressive left is pushing this. Society's bad and we shouldn't punish criminals, so let them do what they want. And meantime, all these victims, as you pointed out, are getting hurt. And more and more and more and more. And they say, oh, well, crime's dropping. Yeah, if you want to do stats, but the horrific nature of the crimes is getting worse. I mean, gangs control the south side of Chicago. Gangs control a big portion of the Bronx. And the authorities let them control it. That's insane. So, after you read Confronting Evil, people should just think about it. What can I do in my town? What can I do, my school board or whatever it may be? Get involved. If you're a good person, you almost have a mandate, if you're a Christian, to come up against evil, to combat it.
People are afraid to speak up. You know what? A quick story. My father was a pediatrician, and like the stats they say with crimes, only 1 in 100,000 people got shot. Well, my father said if your son or daughter is the 1 in 100,000, it doesn't matter about the other 99,000 that didn't. And I think that the crime is so devastating. But let's talk. I cut you off. I wanted to ask about Charlie Kirk, and you knew Charlie Kirk, and what do you make of that? Is it just like we said before, just an extreme nut that was radicalized, or does it? Now both sides are pointing the finger at each other, but it's obviously, the language, the rhetoric is not an accident. I don't think. Am I wrong? Is the language used to Hitler? Trump's a Hitler. They're all Nazis. The ICE is Nazis. Is it? The language is by design. It's not a mistake that they're all on the same page, correct?
No, but you can't generalize about pointing fingers to who incited this and you incited that. The guy who shot Charlie Kirk and who tried to kill President Trump, those people, that's individual evil. Individual evil. And there's millions of them. I put the number of Americans who are hardcore evil at 15% of the population. It's a lot of people. Your dope dealer on a corner is evil. Okay? Anybody who's extorting poor people, anybody who's beating people up, That's just singular individual evil. That's what we're dealing with here. And you can try to generalize about it, but it doesn't get you anywhere. And what I write about is collective evil, where a lot of things went into creating situations where millions of people got hurt, got killed, whatever it may be. But in the United States today, we have a growing internet problem. Because it used to be, and you know this to be true, Sheriff, if you were a bad guy, everybody in your town knew you were a bad guy, and you were isolated. You were a pariah. Now you can find your gang on a click on the internet, telling you to do bad things, spurring you on. All of this is so easy, and the mentally ill people, and that's where these assassins fall under that. They'll act. Now that doesn't excuse. If I say mentally ill, it doesn't excuse you. Those people knew what they were doing. The guy in the bus in Charlotte knew he was taking a knife out and slitting the woman's throat. He knew it. Might have been mentally ill, but you got to get him off the street forever. And when you have a situation where it's easy to join the evil club, you're going to have more of it. And that's what social media has brought.
I think when it comes to individuals like that, the society has allowed them to be desensitized when they get points for playing games at 8 and 10 years old. The more people you kill, the more points you get. Several years ago in England, they wanted to put a school shooter, active school shooter game together. And myself and a lot of other law enforcement across our country and across the world said, stop it. How sick are you? And so much is driven definitely by the internet, because if you see the videos, these guys will rob somebody, beat somebody, rape somebody, and think nothing of putting it on the internet. Brag about it. What's your sense of our future? Can we turn this around? We, like you said, we all got to step up. But the only way they succeed is when good men fail, stand by silently. But what are the steps that somebody like me on my level, on a county level or on a state level, can do? Is it just a matter of trying to educate other people? Or what can we do to turn the tide back?
Well, the first step is awareness, and the Charlie Kirk murder accomplished that. So even the people who don't pay attention, the people who don't care, everybody was locked in on that. And 95% of people know that was abhorrent, that was evil, and we can't tolerate it. 5% are loons, nothing we can do about that in a free society. But awareness is number one. And the public schools have let everybody down. Most importantly, they've let their own students down by failing to teach. My book, Confronting Evil, should be in every senior high school history class in the country. Everyone.
Very
because
historical.
they're not teaching young Americans about the world, about the true nature of the world. So if you don't have religion anymore, and that's declined dramatically in America and Western Europe, if you don't have that, the only defense is the schools. And they have totally abdicated their responsibility. So people like you and all law enforcement should be going to the schools, should be talking about crime and punishment, and raising awareness of the problem. And it's not going to get better in the future unless the younger generation has a realistic view of it. And that can work. That can work.
Can you touch for a second on slavery in America? Because that was an evil unmatched. And I think that reading your book, it's excellent because it was all generated by money.
We focus in on two of the slavers, one in Virginia and one in New Orleans, who had a partnership, became the richest men in the world by selling human beings, brutalizing them, breaking up families. It was horrible. And I included them in the book because for a shock quotient, So this is not just Genghis Khan we're talking about here. It's not just the Ayatollah in Persia, Iran. It's here. But the one thing that separates us, Sheriff, us being the United States, is throughout our history, we have tried to right the wrongs. So all of these young kids who fought on the side of the Union in the Civil War were killed and maimed. They did that so that slaves would be free. And that isn't emphasized by the progressive left. That drives me absolutely crazy. They just say, oh, look at what a bad nation America is. Look at slavery. Okay, that was wrong. The worst thing that's happened in our country was slavery. But Abraham Lincoln and millions of Americans at least partially righted the wrong. It wasn't like Russia, where they just let it go. China, to this day, I was in China in May. Now they done killed 20 million Chinese. There's pictures all over the place. You imagine an American killing 20 million Americans and you got a picture all over the place? Come on. So we as a country in our history have righted a lot of the wrongs, yet that is dismissed in many precincts.
What do you said you're over in China. One thing I had a long conversation with a fella, who's a friend of mine from high school who does business in China. He said the problem with America is we are a society that wants everything right today. We want to get rich today. We want to enjoy ourselves. We want to feel good. Just Chinese have a 100 or 200-year plan. They don't mind waiting us out. They want to destroy us. Make no mistake. They want to destroy us like the other people who want to destroy the infidels, which we are, but China for a different reason. They don't mind waiting, and we want everything immediate. Does that square with your study of history, that China has that ability to look at the long run, the long game, and say, okay, what are we going to do to mess with these people?
Yeah, it's a much more patient society than America. And what else do they have to do? I mean, it's the biggest police state that's ever existed in the history of mankind. You can't do anything. If you're Chinese, you have no rights. None. I couldn't even bring my cell phone to Beijing. We had to bring burners because they'd hacked the cell phone. You can't get anything. You can't do anything unless the government tells you can do it. And if you go against the government, you disappear. So the Chinese are very, I would say, fatalistic people. They've never had a day of freedom in the entire existence of China, going all the way back to Genghis Khan. Chinese have never been free. They don't know what that is. As far as destroying us, there's a division in the country. Some realistic people know that they're not going to be able to destroy America. It's not going to happen. So they want détente so that the Chinese people will live better and they won't have to worry about a revolution on their own doorstep. We're not going to change China. Trump knows that. But we have to do business with them because they're a very, very powerful country. And I think it can, that's why I went over there. I addressed the Politburo at their request. I answered their questions about President Trump and our country. I didn't debate them. I didn't try to convince them. I just answered their questions. I don't think it's ever been done by a U.S. civilian in the history of the country. We can't find anybody. And the reason they invited me, and this is interesting, is because they watched me on YouTube, Sheriff. The government watches me on YouTube, and they know I'm a straight shooter, and they know I have access to President Trump. So that's why I got the invitation to go over there. And I did, and I did it for my country. And of course, I debriefed the president when I came back. Chinese knew I was going to do that. But I think there's a potential there. Unlike Putin, I think Putin is going to be really a problem going forward. But I think there's a potential for détente with China based upon the economy. And I'm hoping that's the case.
Russian, we're going to be, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. We're going to be playing this in a couple of weeks in our cycle. But right as we went on last night, Comey gets indicted. But after Trump says, Pam Bondi, do something, and 4 days later, Comey gets indicted. What's going to be the fallout from that? Is it just going to be the same old with the Dems saying, oh, they've weaponized the DOJ, and the Republicans saying, well, you weaponized it, we're just getting equalizing it. What do you foresee, or is it too soon to see how that plays out as far as the impact?
Well, I think Comey's got a problem because he prosecuted former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, the general, on the exact same charge he's being brought in, lying to FBI for Flynn, lying to Congress for Comey. And it looks like Comey did it. And I think the government has enough to prove it. But it's going to be politicized from day one. And people who hate Trump are going to, cloak it like, oh, this is Trump getting revenge. And that's true to some extent. And Letitia James is next. The president sees it as retribution. He sees it as his duty to right these wrongs that these people, Comey, Letitia James, Schiff, Senator Schiff from California, he sees it as his obligation to right those wrongs. Problem is that when the president speaks out about a case, it makes it harder for the prosecution because the judicial system doesn't like that. So I think there's enough evidence that Comey is going to have a problem, but it's going to be politicized and it already has. It's already started from day one.
Well, what's interesting is they presented 3 charges and they indicted on 2, which means to me that they obviously indicted on the stronger cases and it wasn't a rubber stamp grand jury. One other thing I have to tell you, right now, the people around the former vice president are banging their head against the wall saying, why did we release her book the same time as O'Reilly? Because I think she's destined to the front box when you go into the stores that says 50% discount, just so she can get her numbers up. But I thought that was a pretty lame thing. I thought that was pretty lame for her to attack everybody else. And talk about profile and courage. Why didn't you speak up when all this was going on? Kamala. But,
yeah.
Hey, Bill.
Well, look, I know all these people. I know all these people. And I can tell everybody in New York State that if Kamala Harris had won the election, this country would not be nearly as secure as it is now. And I don't care whether you elect Trump or not. She would have continued the open border. There's no way the Chinese or the Russians respect her. They don't respect her at all. So that's the truth. You don't want to believe it, don't believe it. But I know them all. I know how it works. And I'm just telling you that I think God looks out for America. And certainly President Trump's not a perfect person. But the alternative in that election, whoa.
We would have been in trouble.
That's what I tell all my liberal friends. If Kamala were in the seat, boy, we'd be in major, major trouble.
We'd be deeper than having somebody in there who didn't know where they were. What's sad is the press will never give Trump credit for closing the southern border within 3 months. Hey, Bill, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule, folks. We're going to list where you can follow, subscribe, and view Bill O'Reilly's No Spin News and his other channels. I don't have to tell you good luck on the book because I know it's already #1 on so many platforms. Thanks a lot, Bill. Appreciate it.
Okay, Sheriff. Stay well, and I hope to get up there someday and take you to lunch.
I'd appreciate that. I'll tell you, if you come up here, I'll take you to lunch. None of my friends would believe I'd spend the money, but I'll treat. So.
Well, that's a good incentive. Have a good autumn up there.
Thank you. I want to thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the program as much as I enjoyed interviewing Bill. He has so much insight into history, into politics, and into evil after you're listening to the stories that are enclosed and included in this book. I will tell you that it's been an honor and privilege to have him here. We hope to have him in the future. Again, Confronting Evil. There's so much that I learned from this book. Millions and millions of people across this a world that have been killed by evil dictators, and where they come from and what motivates them and what they do, that we can't forget. We have to remember. And as Bill said, we can defeat evil by fighting back and not remaining silent. So I'll ask you to please share, subscribe, and like the Rich Giardino Show on all of our platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, Apple, X, and Spotify, among others. Again, it was great having Bill O'Reilly with us. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you.
Like and subscribe to The Rich Giardino Show, part of the Elite Influencer Network, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time on The Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.